I had to get in to meet Margot. I had to say something, be somebody, make a like.
Some people thought Anne Baxter was just another Hollywood star, but she was a force that lit up screens and broke rules. But how could this brave artist make such a big difference in an area where perfection is expected? People are still moved by her story because it has brave parts, new decisions, and a legacy that lives on. Stay tuned as we learn more about the life of a brave woman whose honesty changed Hollywood's golden age. Rising star in Hollywood's golden age, Anne Baxter's path to success started in a world full of flash, shine, and an hope for more than just life. People who were movie stars were the most important people in Hollywood in the 1940s. Anne didn't just want to be famous, she also wanted to be unique in a world full of people who looked like her. Anne was set on making a name for herself from a very young age. Her family encouraged her love of the arts, so she was really into movies and wanted to be an actress. Anne did not want to be another old actor. She wanted to be known. She took acting classes and worked hard to get better because she wanted to and felt good about herself. When she was 16, an agent saw her and soon she was getting calls from Hollywood. Anne's first movie role was in the 1940 movie *20 Mule Team*. For Anne, it was just the beginning of something great, but it lacked style. She didn't just sit around and wait for chances to come her way. She went out and got them. Her determination was like a spark that showed the way. Anne was very brave in the early parts she played. When she wrote, she didn't mind writing about bad people. In the 1941 movie *Swamp Water*, she played a wild woods girl who was trying to stay alive. Because it was honest and real, her act stood out. Not many artists her age could match that level of depth. Someone who was honest in everything she did quickly became known by those who didn't like her. As actors back then, they were sometimes only able to play certain roles like the pretty diva, the nice girl next door, or the princess in trouble. But Anne said that these thoughts about her shouldn't make her who she is. It was easy for her to choose clothes that made her strength and flexibility stand out. When Anne played a part, she gave it her all, whether it was a brave person or a weak but strong one. In 1942, she had one of her first truly great roles in The Magnificent Ambersons, which was directed by the great Orson Welles. Lynn played Lucy Morgan, a smart woman who was very sure of herself. You had to be more than just pretty to get this job. It also needed inner strength and charm. Anne gave. Her act proved beyond a question that she was a strong woman, and not just another pretty face in Hollywood. Anne also had trouble going places. It was hard to make it in Hollywood, and young artists sometimes felt like they had to fit in. Anne, on the other hand, didn't change. More than ever, she worked hard and often stayed up late to make her shows better. Because she worked so hard, 20th Century Fox hired her. Anne Baxter wasn't afraid to take chances when she first started out in Hollywood. She became well known for being brave, smart, and honest. Anne was not only going to be a rising star, she was going to be one of the biggest stars of Hollywood's golden age. Anne Baxter was just starting out on her journey, but her early work showed how committed and determined she was. She showed with each part that she wasn't just adding to Hollywood's history, but also making it her own in her own way. Discover how Anne Baxter's bold roles and determination made her stand out in an era of Hollywood perfection, bold choices on screen. You could really see people come to life when Anne Baxter was making movies. She didn't just play the parts, she changed into them, which made every act amazing. People always paid attention to her because she was willing to take risks that made her stand out from other artists of her time. When Anne worked, she did a lot of interesting things, but The Razor's Edge, 1946, was one of her most well-known parts. Sophie MacDonald was Anne's role in The Razor's Edge. Sophie is a woman who has lost a lot and falls into a dark world full of pain and suffering. It wasn't flashy or pretty, but this job was honest and hard. Anne put a lot of effort into the part and showed how hurt, angry, and weak Sophie was. Because she brought Sophie's problems to life so well, viewers felt like they were going through them too. Because of how well she played her part, She won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. People who review old movies praised her for having the guts to play such a tough role and showing a side of life that isn't often shown. Anne did things, but she also had feelings. And The Razor's Edge wasn't the only time Anne broke the rules. People knew she chose people who were brave enough to break the rules or question authority. In the 1950 movie All About Eve, Anne played Eve Harrington, a young woman who will do anything to become famous. Eve wasn't a good person or a bad person. It was hard to deal with her, and Anne believed her. People were drawn to Eve's smarts and charm, and Anne's role as her became one of the most famous in movie history. Hollywood liked making movies that fit into nice little boxes. Anne's parts didn't always follow those rules, though. In her books, she showed that women can be strong, weak, and many other things at the same time. In the 1948 movie Yellow Sky, Anne played a hard-working person from the Wild West. In a world run by men, she was smart and brave to stand up for herself. The princess wasn't in trouble. Anne made it clear that it was uplifting to see a strong woman. Anne was brave in both the parts she played and the way she played them. She didn't hide scenes that were hard to read or made you feel a lot. Some artists might have been careful, but Anne went all in. It wasn't enough for her to look good on film. She also had to tell stories that mattered and make people think and feel. They thought she was one of the most versatile artists of her time and gave her high marks for her strong performances. People really liked how she could play different roles, like a weak widow in The Razor's Edge and a smart newbie in All About Eve. Both directors and fans loved Anne because she could play any part. Still, no one agreed with the decision she made. Some people didn't like her bodies because they were too strong or sexy. They didn't know any of the women who were shown to be so different and deep. But Anne didn't care what people said. She knew that as an artist you had to push the limits. People in the crowd, on the other hand, told her she was very brave. They liked how Anne's shows showed how she felt and the everyday troubles people have. People they could connect to were in her books, even if they were flawed or did bad things. Anne showed that being honest was the best way to act and that mistakes were beautiful. She became a star by making dangerous choices in movies that changed how women were shown in movies. Her parts broke social norms and made room for women with more complex and interesting stories. Anne wasn't just acting. With each great show she put on, she made history, a life beyond the spotlight. What Anne Baxter did for fun was just as interesting as the parts she played. In her personal life, she did brave things, took turns she didn't expect, and really wanted to live a real life. On the other hand, her skill drew people in. Like the roles Anne played, Anne's real life had its ups and downs, which made her the wonderful person she was. Anne wasn't going to live in Hollywood like everyone else. Even though it was against the rules, she thought of her life as her own. How brave she was shown by the people she dated. Anne got married 3 times. She learned a lot from each one. The man she married first, John Hodiak, was also an actress. Anne stayed friends with him even after they broke up. Even when she was in love, she always cared about being free and honest. Things changed a lot when Anne married Randolph Galt for the 2nd time. They quit the bright lights of Hollywood to live on an Australian ranch. Anne's news that she was moving to a ranch shocked a lot of people. The ease and fun of it made her love it. She tried to teach her kids about real life instead of the fun parts of her job when she was a mom. Anne learned in Australia that she wasn't just a star, and that she could find happiness in odd places. It was sad that David Klee, an investment banker, died before the end of her 3rd marriage. Even though Anne was sad, she was strong and kept her mind on her family and crafts. She chose to be brave in every new part of her life instead of letting her problems define her. Along with her close friends and family, Anne had issues that most people have never had to face. She had doubts and felt sad just like everyone else. It was hard to deal with being popular and having to live up to certain standards for Hollywood women. Anne's goal has always been to be herself. She learned how to keep her public image in check and her private life in order, which led to a healthy life. Anne liked a lot of things besides playing. I was really interested in how she used her power to help people and make things better. She worked to make schools and healthcare better in poor places and gave money to groups that helped kids. Anne said that having wins was not the only thing that made someone successful. It was also about helping other people and getting them to do the same. Writing was one of her favorite things to do. Anne loved putting down her thoughts. She even wrote a biography about her life that was very interesting. The things she said were real and honest because she had learned from them. Through her writing, Anne talked about both her good times and her bad ones. This showed that even popular people have weak moments. Anne was unique, which was one of her best traits. She wasn't afraid to take risks when she wasn't on TV. Anne loved everything she did, from taking care of her kids to singing to fighting for a cause. She was open to life and wouldn't let what other people thought of her define her. Anne Baxter had a brave, strong, and strong-willed desire to live a full life. Being herself in public was just as amazing as what she did in the spotlight. This shows that being yourself is the key to real success. How did Anne Baxter's bravery shape her reputation, both on and off the screen? The answer will give you ideas. Anne Baxter and the evolution of Hollywood. Anne Baxter's writing not only showed how Hollywood changed, but it also showed how she reached her own goals. As the movie business grew, Anne had to adapt to new situations and rethink what it meant to be a leading lady. Her bold choices, groundbreaking acts, and unwavering individuality were big parts of how Hollywood fame was measured and how people thought about actors. Anne's first job in Hollywood was in the 1940s, when the rules were very strict for stars. A lot of the time, actresses played the weak girl, the glitzy queen, or the pretty young thing. In these parts, there wasn't much room for subtlety or depth. Anne didn't want to do these things, though. By giving her characters real flaws, she showed that women could be difficult, flawed, and strong in her writing. She broke the rules in movies like All About Eve, 1950, and The Razor's Edge, 1946. That altered how people saw Sophie MacDonald in The Razor's Edge. Sophia's battles with addiction and loss were real and honest. They made people question the idea that interesting female leads had to be perfect. Even people who didn't like Anne praised her for being brave to play such a tough role and for making Sophie's pain real. Anne broke the rules, even though it was the 1950s in Hollywood. In All About Eve, she played Eve Harrington, a strong, smart, and real person. Anne did a great job playing Eve, even though she wasn't a normal person. It became possible for women to have more difficult jobs in the future because she showed that women can be just as difficult and ambitious as men. Anne's work showed how Hollywood was changing at this time. People were more ready to talk about things that were controversial in the 1950s and 1960s. Stories also got more daring. Anne led this change by picking parts that looked at people's flaws and feelings in new ways. Her work showed that people wanted people who looked like they were real and not made up. People who worked with Anne talked a lot about how she changed the business. The 1942 movie, The Magnificent Ambersons, was directed by Orson Welles, who loved how she could give her characters depth. He once said that Anne had a special talent for bringing any figure to life, no matter how big or small it was. Others who worked with her, like Bette Davis and Gregory Peck, said she was professional and brave, and they always pushed herself to do her best. The reviewers also saw how Anne changed things. They saw how her work went against the grain and helped other artists get ahead. Anne opened up new roles for women in movies because she didn't fit Hollywood's narrow idea of what a main lady should look like. Aside from the talks she gave, Anne had an impact. It was important to her that artists were respected and given chances to shine. She talked a lot about how stories should be based on real events because she believed movies could show people problems in real life and move them to make changes. Anne Baxter was a sign of progress in Hollywood because she worked hard at her job and made decisions without fear. She showed that you need to think outside the box if you want to be successful. Today, actors still get ideas from her work because it shows them that being yourself is the best way to act. Anne Baxter wasn't just a part of Hollywood's history, she made it different. It takes a lot of strength to be yourself, keep going when things get tough, and be brave enough to question what other people think. Anne Baxter was at the top of Hollywood as it grew. She proved that stories that aren't afraid to be different are the best. The All About Eve legacy. One of the most famous movie roles ever is Anne Baxter's as Eve Harrington in All About Eve, 1950. This part not only helped Anne's career, but it also made her look like a brave actress who was ready to look into the complicated nature of love. The film is a masterpiece, and Anne's role as Eve, a smart girl who will do anything to be popular, changed Hollywood for good. All About Eve is a play about what it's like to work in the theater and what people will do to get ahead. Bette Davis, who played Eve Harrington in Anne, meets Margot Channing when she is young and is blown away by her fame. Because Eve is shy and has pretty eyes, she seems like a nice person at first. But as the story goes on, we find out more about her. Eve is ready to use anyone to get what she wants. Anne had never played a part like this before. It was very important, had a lot of levels, and was morally questionable. Making All About Eve was just as interesting as watching it. Some of the smartest and most talented people in Hollywood worked on the set. They became very close. Anne knew Bette Davis, who was known for being smart and strong-willed. There were reports that the two actors were trying to beat each other, but they both thought the other was very good. Afterwards, Anne shared how impressed she was with Bette's skill and how hard she worked to become Margot Channing. Anne's character gives an emotional speech in a well-known story from the set. Joseph L. Mankiewicz, who directed and wrote the story, was very excited about the moment. Anne worked non-stop because she was set on getting the best shot possible. Mankiewicz thought it was one of the most important parts of the movie, and the way she played Eve's sensitivity and hidden reasons moved everyone. People will always remember the scene where Anne was able to hold her own against Bette Davis's powerful performance as Margot Channing, which was much better than that of her less experienced co-stars. Anne didn't feel threatened by Bette's intensity. Instead, she matched it. This produced a dynamic tension that made both of their acts better. Both fans and critics loved how well they got along on screen, which made the movie's story of desire and competition more interesting. Because Anne could make a character with questionable values seem real, she did a great job as Eve Harrington. People who knew what it was like to have to give up things and make sacrifices in order to succeed could relate to Eve's dream. Anne dressed Eve up. Eve was sneaky on the outside, but she was really a scared woman with a strong need to be liked. It was clear from her act that people are ambitious because they are afraid of failing. They need to be praised, and they can feel alone on their way to the top. Because Anne could turn Eve into a person, she changed from a bad girl to a sad and interesting person. Anne got a lot of praise for being brave. Anne's performance was a big reason why All About Eve became a classic so quickly. There were 14 nominations for the movie that year, and it won 6, which was a record. Some people liked Anne's quiet performance as Eve just as much as Bette Davis's. She was nominated for Best Actress at the Academy Awards, which shows that she can shine in a movie with lots of great actors. Anne's writing changed a lot after reading All About Eve. There was more proof that she is a risk-taking actor who isn't afraid to show the worst in people. Anne's brave act as Eve Harrington made other actors want to make their parts more complicated and vulnerable. Eve Harrington became one of the most famous movie characters. The movie also showed how Anne can act in different ways. And in The Razor's Edge, she played Sophie MacDonald, who was weak. She played Constance May in Yellow Sky, who was strong and bold. Since All About Eve, she had already shown that she could do many things. The way Eve Harrington played Anne, on the other hand, showed that she is a leading lady with the skills and attitude to carry a movie. All About Eve was more than just a show for Anne Baxter. She showed that female characters could be driven, flawed, and totally real. In a time when movie women were sometimes just stock characters, Anne Harrington's Eve Harrington was a deep and interesting person. People still talk about All About Eve, and Anne Baxter will always be known for helping to make it a hit. Her part as Eve Harrington not only changed movie history, but it also changed her career. Actors and directors still look up to Anne for how bravely she played the part. It shows that honest emotions and risky decisions are what make a great story. Unveiling the real Anne Baxter. Always not afraid to say what she thought, Anne Baxter was, in a field known for well-groomed looks and well-thought-out speeches, Anne's honesty stood out. She didn't really want to keep up the flashy image that Hollywood stars were expected to have. Instead, she gave an honest look at fame, beauty standards, and the competitive politics of show business. Being honest made her unique, but it also caused problems. In interviews, Anne was shown to be a woman who was very aware of the problems in her field. A lot of the time, she talked about how actors are expected to be young, perfect, and always beautiful. Anne saw that these ideas of beauty were not only unrealistic but also damaging. She once said that actors were rated more on how they looked than on how good they were at their jobs, which she found both annoying and limiting. Anne, on the other hand, refused to completely follow these rules. The way people saw her didn't define her, even though she knew how important it was. At a time when every public appearance was an act, she often went out in public without a lot of makeup or a fancy outfit, which was a brave choice. Anne thought that her value as an actor came from her skill and honesty, not from being able to seem perfect. In her book, Intermission: A True Story, you could read more about how she felt about Hollywood and fame. Anne told everything about her life in the book, from the good and bad times of her work. She talked about how exciting it was to win an Oscar, and how sometimes being famous made her feel lonely. Anne's work showed a real and honest side of her that people rarely saw on film. Anne also gave speeches that people will never forget. Even though it meant going against what was already happening, she wasn't afraid to question it. She was known for speaking out against the lack of big chances for women in Hollywood. Anne said that female roles were sometimes pushed to the background and were only there to be pretty or as love interests. She pushed stories that showed how complicated real women are, which was ahead of its time. Hollywood standards sometimes ran into this honesty. People who worked in the industry often didn't like how willing Anne was to tell the truth. Some people were rude or indifferent because she wouldn't play the game. She didn't want to follow unspoken rules to get parts or show off her strong, beautiful body. Anne instead focused on being true to herself, even if that meant missing out on opportunities. The most honest thing about her was that she didn't like parts that seemed shallow or pointless. Anne turned down projects that didn't interest her, even if they were sure to make her money. She had said before that she would rather wait for a job that really moved her than do something she didn't agree with. Her honesty earned her respect from her coworkers, even though it made her job more difficult at times. Anne was honest inside and outside of work. She was honest about her problems, like balancing work and family. Anne didn't keep her personal life a secret like many celebrities did. Instead, she wanted people to see that even the most glamorous lives aren't perfect. Fans who liked her not only for her singing but also for being honest and humble kept her alive. Without a doubt, Anne's impact has been shaped by how open she was. It may have hurt her chances of getting a job for a short time, but it solidified her image as a real and brave person. In addition to her great acts, she is known today for not giving up on her beliefs. People who believe in being true to themselves no matter what can still find strength in Anne's story. Anne Baxter stands out in a field that is sometimes defined by illusions because she is honest about her life and work. In her time, being honest was seen as rude, and it had an effect on Hollywood and beyond. By being brave, Anne showed that being honest is a memory that lasts much longer than fame. Find out how Anne Baxter changed herself by going into TV and theater while staying true to who she was as a bold, honest person, later years, and reinvention. Anne Baxter loved playing the same way she did when she was younger. The golden age of Hollywood was coming to an end, and Anne was eager to start new things with charm and drive. By playing parts on TV and the stage, she showed how adaptable she was and how much she loved telling stories. Anne found TV to be a new and interesting thing. A lot of movie stars thought TV was a step down at the time, but Anne saw it as a chance to try something new. In movies like The Alfred Hitchcock Hour and Batman, she played the lead. This showed that she could give any part depth, no matter how serious or funny it was. She was able to do these jobs and was eager to learn new things as the entertainment business changed. Around this time, Anne's love for the theater also began to grow. It was based on All About Eve, so she went back to the stage and played the lead in Applause. Anne's role as Margot Channing, which had been played before by her co-star Bette Davis, was a big deal that showed how her art was getting better. It was said that she was strong and sensitive on stage, which made the idea that she was a strong actor even stronger. Anne also dropped out of the public eye after living in Australia for a while. During this quieter time, she could spend time with her family, reconnect with nature, and think about her future. She said this time was worth a lot because it helped her grow as a person and got her back on track in a way that Hollywood rarely does. Anne was herself in high school. The pressure to fit society's ideas about getting older didn't bother her. Instead, she focused on parts and chances that spoke to her. Anne thought that being honest and good at her job as an actor made her valuable, not trying to look young or cool. After some work, Anne proved she was strong and could do many things. Whether she was on a small stage or a big TV show, she kept people going. She lived to show that you can always start over and that following your dreams can make you happy for a long time. At the end of her life, Anne Baxter showed how much she loved her job and how brave she was when things got better. People will always see her as a brave and talented artist. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more captivating stories. Click on the next video popping up on your screen now for even more fascinating content. See you there.